Okay, today, the tape recorder, did you put the tape recorder on? Today is the second session of the Effective Communication Seminar. And we'll start out the discussion with examining some of the reasons why we have a difficulty in communication, especially communication in couples, that is, between spouses. One reason why we have difficulty in communication is that we have a lack of education in that. We have not been educated in the skill of communication. We learn a lot of things in grammar school and high school and even in university, but this is not something which is often taught. So one reason is a lack of education. The second reason is that we did not observe effective communication between our parents. We observed them communicating in the ways that we learned to communicate, and that is either by suppressing themselves or by one accusing the other. So we have wrong examples. These wrong examples have been imprinted in our subconscious mind. A third reason why our communication is difficult, we have difficulty in communication, is that we have not learned to take responsibility for our reality. So when someone does not take responsibility for his reality, he naturally expects the other to fulfill his needs, and when the other is unable to fulfill his needs, he becomes angry, upset, hurt, and throws the responsibility for his unhappiness onto the other person. This is a basic problem in our communication. Another factor is that we don't have, as of yet, enough inner security or self-acceptance. When I am continuously seeking affirmation from the persons around me, and those persons are in the same position, that they're seeking affirmation from me, this will be always a cause of tension and conflict between us, because I am waiting for the other to recognize that I am right, that I am good, to affirm that he loves me or she loves me or cares for me, or that I am worthy. And this is a continuous source of tension in our relationships. Another factor is that we tend to recreate the situations that we saw in our parents' lives. That is, we recreate two kinds of relationships. The relationships between our parents, or between our parents and ourselves. And so when we choose a spouse, or even with our own children, or in general with other people in our lives, we tend to reenact these situations. If I was the victim, or if one of my parents was the victim, then it's very easy for me to get into the role of the victim. Or if someone was the abuser, I may get into the role of the abuser. If there was abandonment, I may be always expecting abandonment. If there was a non-responsiveness on the part of one or both parents, then I may be also expecting and recreating that. So there is a tendency to recreate that which we have experienced, as if we have recorded in the video player of our mind, the video recorder of our mind, whatever happened then, and then for the rest of our lives we keep replaying this over and over in our relationships. Another factor which is an obstacle to communication is a lack of energy. When our energy is low, when we're not happy, when we are ill, then we are much more susceptible to the negative energy of other persons. That is, little things bother us. And so we get upset, we communicate negatively towards the other person, and that communication becomes now a stimulus for them, and they react negatively again to us, which creates a vicious circle. When we keep our energy high, when we have a high level of energy, the little things don't bother us. And the various stimuli that we receive from other people don't affect us negatively. So keeping a high energy level is very important. Another factor is that we have a lot of wounds in our subconscious mind which have not healed. There's a lot of hurt in us, and these are like open wounds. And when you just touch an open wound, it hurts. When you touch a healed wound, it doesn't hurt. So many of our reactions to what people say and do to us in the present is exaggerated and not in relationship to what is really happening, because they're touching on very sensitive points which are not so important today, but which are open wounds from the past. So we become overly sensitive towards certain kinds of behavior, certain words, certain actions, and react in an exaggerated way towards those. And the other people in our lives the same. We may feel that what we are doing does not justify this exaggerated kind of reaction or sensitivity from the other person. But what we don't realize is that we're touching a very sore spot, which has nothing to do with the present, but with their past. And if someone does not work with those wounds from the past, the wounds of the inner child, then they remain in this very vulnerable state. One can work with these things and heal them, and then become more objective in his reactions. Another reason why we have difficulty in relationships is that we cannot imagine harmony. That is, we tend, if we have had a difficult life, or if we have had unpleasant relationships or experiences in relationships, this creates what we call a thought form. And this thought form does not allow us even to be open to the idea of a harmonious relationship, or maybe not even open to the idea that someone could love us in a stable and lasting way, because we haven't that experience. And so now the thought form which is created in our mind is preventing that experience. It's not allowing that to happen, because we are projecting a negative thought form. Another reason is that we don't see people as they are today. We see them as we have known them in the past, and we limit them with our preconceived idea of them at this point. That is, if I have had with a certain experience, certain person, a certain type of communication until now, then it's very natural that every time I see this person in the light of those previous reactions. I cannot imagine this person reacting in a different way. I'm totally convinced that if I approach him or her in this way, he will react in this particular way. When I approach any person with this preconceived idea of how he or she is going to react, I am sending them subconscious messages which cause them to react in that way. So another factor is my inability to approach persons as if I am approaching them for the first time and without my previous experience with those persons, which always is a limiting experience as we go on. And one last factor which I would like to discuss is that many of our conflicts with other persons are a result of our conflicts with ourselves. Because other people are just mirrors, and they reflect to us one part of ourselves which is conflicting with another part. Most of our conflicts with other persons will be dissolved when we dissolve our inner conflicts, when we are sure about what we want, about what we have the right to be, or to do. Otherwise, the other person is reflecting to us our own doubt, our own inner lack of assurance, or our inner conflict concerning that particular matter. When we are sure of ourselves and very clear, other people very naturally accept us as we are. When we have doubt about ourselves, then we provoke their doubt, their rejection, their confrontation of parts of ourselves, because we're not sure of those aspects of ourselves. So last week we talked about declarative I-messages and responsive I-messages. Before we go on to discuss today the other two types of I-messages, I would like to talk about the ownership of problems. You may have never thought that problems have ownership, and that we may think that we are owning certain problems when it actually belongs to the other, or many times, more frequently, we think the problem belongs to the other when it's really our own property. Let's talk about problems and who owns the problem. This diagram here will help us to understand that. We have this box which contains a person's behavior. And in that box we have various kinds of behavior. Every B is a different type of behavior. And there is a line which separates those two types, or those two categories of behaviors. One category are those that are acceptable, and the other is unacceptable. So, all of the types of behavior which fall into this area of the square are unacceptable to me. I become upset when that person does that thing, or doesn't. It could be something he does or doesn't do. And all of these behaviors which fall into this aspect, this part of the person's life or expression, don't create any kind of problem for me. Now, when that person behaves in a certain way which creates a problem for me, it is my problem. That is, that person may be an alcoholic. That person may be very negative, may be unethical. But that's not his problem. That's a result of his problem. He has some other problem which is causing him to be that way. That his behavior disturbs me is my problem. He definitely has some kind of problem. But when I approach him, supposedly trying to help him with his problem, when that which is bothering me is my problem, that is his behavior, then I'm not going to do effective communication. Because I'm approaching him because I'm unhappy, and I'm approaching him in a way as to say, well, you're unhappy and you have to listen to me. And this is not going to work, because he knows that we're approaching him with a certain amount of egotism and ego-centeredness, because we are unhappy by what he's doing. So it's very important to get clear who owns the problem. Now this line, fortunately or unfortunately, is not stable. It changes. What is acceptable or unacceptable to us is something which is flexible. What are those factors which affect that? One is, as I mentioned earlier, our energy state, our state of body and mind. That is, when our energy is high, this line goes down. Many more things become acceptable, and many fewer things are unacceptable. When our energy is low, when we're ill, when we have pain, when we have a headache, when we're unhappy, this line goes up, and fewer things are acceptable, and many more things are unacceptable. So the first, and perhaps one of the most important, is the state of our body and mind and our energy level. Secondly is the environment. We may find certain types of behavior acceptable in this center, and as unacceptable somewhere else in society. Whereas there may be things which may be considered acceptable in a bar, which may not be acceptable here. or in our home, which we would not be acceptable outside of our home, or outside of our home, which may not be acceptable within our home. So we may accept certain kinds of behavior from our children or spouse when we're alone, but not when we're in company. Or we may accept certain kinds of behavior when we're with others and not when we're alone. So it also changes according to the environment. It also changes according to who the other person is. I mean, if our child spills a glass of milk, it's very possible that we may become completely upset. But if some neighbor who we respect and want their approval breaks one of our most expensive vases, it's very possible for us to say, well, it's not very important, don't worry about it, doesn't mean anything. Completely different reaction towards the child and towards the neighbor. And so we're not objective, we're not being consistent in what is acceptable and what is unacceptable to us. So who the other person is also affects that. But the fourth factor, and probably the most important factor, is our programming. In the ultimate sense, what is acceptable to us is what is positive to our programming, and what is unacceptable to our belief system, to our programming, conscious and subconscious. I noticed that very clearly in a very simple human function, which is burping. That is, in Europe and in America and these so-called civilized countries, people, to burp is considered to be inappropriate in a social situation. In Arabic countries, it's considered to be a compliment to the person who has the house and who has invited you to eat, and it means you're very satisfied with the food. In India, it's just another sound, like the chirping of the birds or the cows or whatever it may be. I mean, it's just something that everyone just burps right there, any place, any time, without it meaning really anything. It's just a sound of the human body. So we see that it's a matter of programming. What would be totally unacceptable in one culture, in another culture with another programming is positive, another culture with another programming is just not important. So there are these four factors: the state of our body and mind, who the other person is, where it is happening, and our programming, which cause what is acceptable and what is unacceptable to us to change. Now, let's divide that into certain categories. One possibility is that my behavior doesn't bother you and your behavior doesn't bother me, in which case we have the situation which is called no problem. We're all happy. I'm happy with your behavior and you're happy with my behavior. The next possibility is that I'm not happy with your behavior, and that means that's my problem. I have the ownership of that problem, in which case the effective means of communication is the I message. I have to explain to the other what my problem is. I do not have to explain to him what he's doing wrong, how bad, insensitive, no good person he is. I simply have to explain what my problem is. The third possibility is that he is upset with something or is upset with my behavior, in which case it is his problem or your problem. His problem, her problem. It's the other's problem. Let's write others. It's the other's problem. In which case, it is if someone is shouting in my face, ridiculing me, completely upset, he has a problem. He's unhappy. Now, I also probably have a problem with this kind of behavior, and I have to distinguish between my problem, which is the fact that I become afraid, hurt, upset when someone speaks to me in that way, and his problem, which is that something is triggering his programming and causing him to be so unhappy that he needs to communicate me in this way, to me in this way. When the problem belongs to the other, the means of communication is active listening. That is, we don't need to apologize, we don't need to fight, we need to address ourselves to this person's problem, to try to see what he is feeling and what he needs at this point. That's called active listening. And the fourth possibility is that it is our problem, which means that we both have a problem. I'm unhappy with your behavior and you're unhappy with mine, and there's no way that we can separate ourselves in this situation. So both own the problem. And in this case, there are two kinds of problems or conflicts. There are need conflicts, conflicts of needs, and value conflicts. That is, our conflict may be based on the fact that I have other needs than you. I want to spend our summer vacation in the mountains and you want to spend it at the sea. Or I want to save our money in the bank and you want to invest it in, you want to buy something at this point. Or I want to raise our children in a liberal way and you want to have greater control over them. So we can't divide our children. You take one, I'll take one. We want to have our vacation together. The money belongs to both of us that I want to put in the bank and you want to spend. So we have conflict of needs. And the second possibility, there is a conflict in values. But there are very few actually conflict in values. Most, if those value conflicts, if we analyze them in depth, we come into need conflicts. And these conflicts, when it's both of our problems, it takes a combination of I-messages and active listening. A specific type of combination which we will discuss in a further class. Okay, so it's important when I want to communicate effectively to understand to whom the problem is owned. That is, who owns this problem. Is it my problem? Then I need to make an I-message. Is it the other person's problem? I need to do active listening. If it's both, then both need to take place. Now, the third type of I-message is called the preventive I-message. In this I-message, we use this I-message when we have noticed in the past with this person or with other persons that when we don't communicate beforehand, problems can be created. And we want to prevent those problems. We want to communicate before the problem arises. For example, if we have to go to a meeting and we know that we have to leave at 9 o'clock and we suspect that some people might be upset about that, we don't wait until 9 o'clock to say, well, now I'm leaving. We explain that from the beginning. If we need the car on Saturday and we have noticed that we have a conflict about who is going to use the car, we don't wait until Saturday to say we need it. We say it on Monday. That is, we learn to communicate beforehand in order to avoid creating problems. This is a preventive I-message. If we want to see a certain program on television and we often conflict about what we're going to watch, we tell the person as much ahead of time as possible and find a solution. It's always much better than springing onto a person, suddenly some need which we have already realized from the past, can be a source of conflict with that person. That's a preventive I-message. Now, in that message, we need to explain what our need is, what our feelings are about that, if it's a serious problem, perhaps even the beliefs which cause us to have that need. That's completely different than a you message. A you message, what many people do is they don't communicate, they don't express their needs, and when the other person has not I had this experience on the weekend and moving some things out of the place that we were, that the persons never expressed to us that, we would like you to leave a few blankets, a few benches, pillows, and then for a period of time. But they just explained afterwards how insensitive they thought that we were because we didn't leave them. When we would have cost us nothing, and we've been very happy to have received that communication. We'd like to leave 5 of these and 3 of these, and we've been very happy to have left them. And it was just a very good example of a very ineffective communication. They just never expressed anything, and afterwards were very angry and hurt that we didn't leave things which we could never have thought that they would have needed. So it's something which people often do, and they're waiting to do it. Many people, just want to be hurt, want to be upset, want to get the chance to be angry at the other person. So if we find that tendency in ourselves, it's better to start avoiding that and to communicate beforehand about what we would need. The fourth type of I-message, and the last type we're going to discuss, is the confrontive I-message. And this is a message which we need to give when a serious problem has been created. And we have a problem now. We're unhappy. We're upset about what is going on, and we need a change. We need some kind of response, some kind of change in the status quo. Now, we're not always aware of this, that we need to give an I-message, because we're not always very aware of our needs or our emotions. We tend to hide them and suppress them. I'd like to give you some of the symptoms that we may observe, which may mean that we may be needing to confront someone more effectively. One is that we may be getting ill quite frequently, especially headaches, asthma, colitis, ulcers. That is, this may mean that we have a lot of needs or emotions which are not effectively communicating, and these are staying within us and making us ill. So one symptom that we may need to start making some confrontive I-messages is that we get ill easily. Another is that we may become depressed or bored, and it's like I give up. There's no possibility of my having the power or the ability to fulfill my needs. It's a lost case. This person is just not going to hear me, or people in general are not going to hear me, because I'm not important, or I don't have the power or the ability. And so I just become depressed, bored with life, out of contact even with myself. The third symptom is that I find myself making frequent sarcastic remarks. If someone confronts me with them, I'll just say, well, I was just joking. But there is some truth behind that sarcasm. There is a reason why that sarcasm is coming out. There is some pain in me. There is some unhappiness which is moving me towards that sarcasm. Another symptom is that I find myself frequently complaining to third persons about another person. If I find myself that every time I'm with my friends complaining about how my husband or wife is treating me, or my child, or my parent, or some co-worker, then this is a very clear sign that I need to talk directly to this person. It would be much more, because talking to the third person is not going to solve my problem. That's just gossip. That I need to speak to the person who is the source, the stimulus of my problem. If I find myself needing to criticize, ridicule, or blame frequently some person, that is, and if I find myself enjoying his failures and enjoying his mistakes, then this means that something is in me There's some kind of resentment. There's some kind of game going on here between us, and it would be better to open this up and communicate with this person. What is happening here? What are my feelings? Why might I enjoy his failure? Another possibility is that I see myself avoiding communication with this person, giving him or her the silent treatment. Then that may also mean that there are things in me which I don't want to feel, and so avoiding this person is the one way of solving my problem. So these are all symptoms that it may be time for me to make an I-message, a confrontive I-message, a very clear message to this person. Now, in every I-message, it's important when we approach the person to be very clear that we are approaching this person because of our own need. That is, I have the problem. I approach that person saying to them, I have a problem and I need your help. I need to talk to you about a problem that I have. This is very important to start out in this way. When I approach someone that you have a problem, that you're not okay, you're not being correct, then the wall is automatic. From that point on, he doesn't hear anything. He's just gathering up his own defenses, what he's going to say, his counterattack, his response. They're not hearing anything. So it's very important that I have a problem, I'm unhappy, I need your help in this situation. Secondly, that this relationship is important. Otherwise I wouldn't be approaching you. So this relationship is important to me. I have a problem with which I need your help. And then we begin to describe what is going on in us, what our feelings are, what our needs are, how we react, what our beliefs are, our programmings are, which are affecting us in this way. And then what we need, what kind of change of behavior, what kind of support we may need from that person. In order to help us with that, I have made up a questionnaire, which you have in your hands. Questionnaire for analyzing emotions created in relationship situations and for forming I-messages. Bring to mind a problem which you have in a relationship. Imagine that the other comes to you and asks you the following questions. Answer them as honestly as possible in the second person, as if you are writing to him or her, as if you are speaking to that person. 1. Does my behavior create any problems for you? So you have to think about the different kinds of what the other person does and what the other person neglects to do also. I mean, neglect to collect their clothing, some children, or to keep their room tidy. Secondly, what exactly is it that I do or do not do which bothers you? And so this is your opportunity to make a list of what the other person does which bothers you or doesn't do. 3. What exactly do you feel when I function in that manner? What emotions do you have? So this takes a bit of a search. We're not always very aware of our emotions. So it'll be very important to try to clarify, what do I feel when my spouse acts in this way? What do I feel when my child acts in this way? Or when my parent speaks to me in that way? When my parent is worried about me and still treats me at the age of 40 as a little child, what do I feel? What are my emotions? Fourth question. What practical problems are created for you by my behavior? There is the emotional problem, but then there's the practical problem. The other person's behavior may cost me money. He may be a co-worker, he may be an employee, and his lack of attention to what he's doing may cost me thousands of dollars. Besides my emotional problem, I have an economic problem. Or a person's way of functioning may prevent me from being able to concentrate on what I want to do. And so I have a practical problem. So there is the emotion. The emotions have to do with question number 3, and practical problems. How this person's behavior becomes an obstacle to my effective functioning is the answer to question 4. 5. What is it that you believe about my behavior which causes you to feel the way that you do? Let's put that in combination with question 6. What is it that you feel about yourself which makes you feel that way when confronted by my particular behavior? Let's take a few examples in order to make a distinction between what we believe about the behavior and what we believe about ourselves. If our spouse is not giving us enough attention, then what we believe about that behavior is that you don't love me. You don't care enough about me. But that wouldn't be a problem if I didn't also have the belief about myself that my self-worth is a function of how interested my spouse is in me. When I don't get that interest from my spouse or my child or my parent, then I begin to doubt my own self-worth or my own security. So the first belief is that you don't do this because you don't care about me, which may be wrong. Maybe tired, maybe preoccupied with other problems, maybe blocked emotionally, maybe crazy about me, but unable to express it through various programming. So I'm making certain assumptions. I'm making an assumption about what this behavior means. For example, I have heard people in the group saying that my child doesn't love me. And when I ask why you believe that, well, he doesn't want to finish university. Or he doesn't want to marry the person that I think he should marry. It's a completely wrong assumption. It has absolutely nothing to do with the love or the lack of love this child may have for that parent. So the original assumption is wrong. But then after that, if that child doesn't love me, then I am not a worthy parent. So I believe something about the behavior, and I make a certain interpretation of that behavior, and then I make another assumption about myself, my security, my self-worth, based on that wrong assumption of why the other person is doing what they are doing. So the questions 5 and 6 have to do with those two interpretations. That is, how am I interpreting the behavior of the other person, and what I believe about myself when I see that behavior. 7. How do you usually react when you feel that way? This is our opportunity to explain to the other person how we may become silent and reserved. We may become angry and upset. We may go and eat as much as we can. We may have various kinds of reactions. 8. What do you need from me? This is your opportunity to write down all your needs from that person. How can I help you to feel better in this relationship? And 9. How would you like our relationship to be? Describe the perfect relationship that you can imagine, which you can imagine. And 10. Is our relationship important to you, and why? And 11. Would you like to ask me? What would you like to ask me? What would you like to know about how I feel and think? This is the opening to active listening. Whenever we give an I message, it must always end with an opportunity for the other person to speak. And then we shift gears from I message to active listening. So we just don't go and give an I message and then leave the room and close the door. We give the I message, and that is a stimulus, and then we hope that the other person can be as honest as possible and explain to us what is going on in them. And of course we have to discuss what active listening is and how we do it. It's something which we need to analyze more deeply. So look down below on this sheet. We have here the means with which we can formulate the I message. Answering these questions will give us the information that we need. And then we can construct that I-message with the guidelines that we have down below. The introduction. That it is my problem, my need to communicate. The information which you may need in order to make your introduction will be found in the answers to questions 1, 2, and 10. That if this relationship is important and what it is that is bothering me. Then there is the body of the I-message, the analysis of feelings, needs, beliefs, reactions, which we find in the answers to question 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then there is what we ask. That is, after we explain our reality, our needs, our emotions, our beliefs, then we come to the point where we're asking for some kind of change of behavior, some kind of cooperation, something that we need. And so that we may find that found in answers to question 8 and 9. What we ask from the other person. Do we ask him to be more attentive, to have some kind of cooperation practically in cleaning the house? Do we need more affection? Do we want to do something specific together? We express our need. And the last part is opening to active listening, in which we say, in some way, and now I am very interested to see how you feel, what your needs are, how you have been feeling in terms of this problem, what is going on in you. Tell me how you feel with my message and how you feel with me in general. What do you need from me? And so this is an I-message which can be used in confronting various problems which we have in our close personal relationships, either with spouses, parents, children, co-workers, brothers and sisters, whoever it may be. Now, because often with certain people the atmosphere is rather electric and both we and they can easily get off-center, Carl Rogers has made up what is called Rogers' Rule, which is very effective in toning things down in any kind of communication. And that is very simple. If I am talking to you, and I have made my I-message to you, before you can answer me, you must repeat to me, to my satisfaction, what I said. It's very important. Because often we don't hear or we mishear. We misinterpret. I say A and you understand Z. You misinterpret what I say. So you repeat to me what I said, what you understood that I said. And then if I am satisfied, then you start speaking to me. And you tell me, and then before I can answer you, I have to say to you, to your satisfaction, what you said. That makes me listen, and it solves any problems of miscommunication. Because if I misunderstood you, then before I go to answer you, that will be cleared up, because you will tell me, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And we come to the point of understanding. It's a very powerful way to solve problems with persons with whom we very easily get off the track and get into blaming, getting into hurt, anger, and negative kinds of communication. It's called Rogers' Rule. Now that was a lot of information, and this will take a lot of practice, and it's not so easy, because we may learn how to do it mentally, but our emotions are very much in control of our lives, and it'll take a lot of practice to be able to learn to communicate with I-messages most of the time. When we're in the process of the I-message, and we see the other person getting upset, we see their eyes going up, going down, we see hurt, anger, closing, crying. We see various symptoms that this is not getting across positively. Stop. You're wasting time. Shift gears and go into active listening. What are you feeling? If we don't clear up the emotions which are causing this person not to look at us, to feel uncomfortable, to look at their newspaper, to look at the television, to walk out of the room, in the extreme case, there's no sense in continuing. So we have to be sensitive to what's going on. And when we see these signs that this person is upset, there's no sense in continuing with our explanation. Stop, go into active listening until you see that that person is reconnecting, has a chance to express what they are feeling, get out what's going on in them, and then continue. So one may have to shift gears going in and out between I-message, active listening, I-message, active listening, using the active listening to open up the way, make connection so that we can continue the I-message. So let's say a few general tips for I-listening, for active listening. The first and most important is to look into the other person's eyes. That is, to have eye contact. Now, we can't force someone to do that, but very frequently in such situations I have asked the other person, please look into my eyes. It's difficult for me to communicate to you when you're not doing that. It's something that we can ask, but we have to be sensitive. If it causes the other person to become even more defensive, then just let them be. Let them even close their eyes if they need it. But we should at least give them our eyes and the front of our body. We can't make an I-message speaking to someone like this with our shoulder. That is, we must give them all of our presence. So we give them at least the front of our body and our eyes. Secondly, we give evidence in some way that we are interested and that we hear what they are saying. That usually is done by occasionally repeating what we have heard. That is, verifying. If I have heard you correctly, you are feeling that. Now, be careful. This verification is not a psychological analysis. It's not that I'm saying, I understand that you have a complex with your mother and it's coming out at me. No. We don't go one step ahead of the other person or behind what he's saying. We just say what they are saying, nothing else. We just repeat their words as they said them or as we hear them. That is to verify to them that we are listening and to be sure we are listening correctly. So one type of question which is used in active listening is simply to repeat what we have heard so to be sure that we have heard correctly, and also give to the other person the opportunity to make any kind of adjustments in that. And to mirror that back to them. The second kind of question has the purpose of helping that person go deeper. So we may ask, well, what is it that you believe which makes you feel that way? Or what other emotions do you have? Or do you feel that way only in this situation with me, or also with others? Do it. Okay. So, the second category of questions is the questions that we ask in order to help that person go deeper. And this is what our group leaders learn. How to ask questions which help persons discover their own answers to their questions and decide themselves what they want to do. Active listening. In active listening, we avoid giving advice or making judgments. We try to be just a mirror and to have no opinion about what the other person should do or not to do, but allow them to make that decision, perhaps helping them by our questions. Empathy, or identifying with the other person's pain, trying to put ourselves in their position, to imagine, I am this person. I have these programmings and I am experiencing this life situation, will help us, first of all, to gain the other person's trust, to experience a certain amount of unity, but also it will guide us to the right words and questions which will help this person more effectively. So it's very important to try to imagine that I am this other person. Sometimes, but this should not be overdone, it's helpful for us to share with that person similar problems or situations which we have, because often when we open up, that helps them to open up. But we shouldn't take over the conversation and talk about an hour and a half about our problem and leave this person just listening. I mean, we should be listening. But we could stop for 5 minutes and just share, I have this similar problem. But not in the sense that, well, because I solved it in this way, you'll have to solve it in this way. Because everyone may have their own solution and a different lesson to learn. And to be as genuine and as honest as possible. And I think that that which really makes active listening effective is acceptance. That is, that I can hear that this person hates his mother and would like to kill her. And just accept that. That is, being able to accept anything I hear from this person, creating a space of you're okay with anything that you feel. That all parts of you are acceptable to me. When we create this kind of atmosphere, this person can open up. Often people come to me from these groups and say, I try to make these messages, I try to do this thing, but people don't open up. And we must understand that we will create the atmosphere of security, of acceptance, that will allow others to open up. Now, some people may be more difficult than others. Some people may have very traumatic childhood experiences in which they are very afraid of opening up. And we have to respect that. But often we play games about who is right and who is correct. And the other person is tired of playing this game. And if we're better at it, then they just stop communicating. And often women are very effective at this because they may be more effective with words. And so the man just stops communicating. And the woman may be just great at this game, but she can't win because he stops communicating. So we need to realize that if the other is not opening up, we're not creating the space of acceptance, of total acceptance, which allows that person to begin opening. So I think we had a lot of information today. Let's make a short conclusion of what we have said. There are many factors which make communication difficult for us. A lack of communication, poor examples as children. We need to be careful to understand to whom the problem belongs. If it's my problem, I use active listening. If it's their problem, my problem, I use I-message. If it's their problem, I use active listening. Learn to formulate an I-message with the help of this questionnaire, which I would like you to take at least one, but perhaps better 2 or 3 examples for next week, and fill that out so that we can practice our more extensive I-messages and our more important I-messages next week. And also just begin trying active listening when people around you have problems. Try to get out of your mind what you think they should do and what is right and what is wrong, and try just to listen, to hear what the other person is saying, identify with them, and perhaps with some very simple questions help them to go a little deeper into what they're trying to express. So for next time, I would like you to fill out this questionnaire and then construct a few I-messages so that we can practice them. Are there any questions about today's session or last week's, or about the declarative or responsive messages that we learned to make last week? If there are no questions, then we can break down into our groups, and work personally.